Yes, so gut health 101. So essentially a starting point is the fact that our guts literally and our brains are connected, and they're, like you said, connected by something called a vagus nerve. They're also connected because there's a lot of things that happen in our guts that actually end up then affecting our brains.
Hey healthcare providers, you're listening to the Burnout to Lit Up podcast. Hosted by myself, Erica, and my husband, Michael. We're an OT-PT team that understands the healthcare industry's got some serious issues.
Inspired by our own experience with burnout, we've made it our mission and passion to help you navigate your career in healthcare by cultivating wellness, growing both personally and professionally, and advocating for a better workplace.
Whether you are a clinician or manager, new grad or seasoned vet, join us each week as we share interviews, research, stories, and strategies that will give you the tools to go from burnt out to your most lit up self.
Let's dive in.
You wanna know what pissed me off? That I couldn't find Big Pimpin' by Jay-Z on Spotify.
Big
and like
pimpin',
spinning cheese.
Is cheese like a word for cheese is money, right?
Yeah, but like I was really in the mood to hear it yesterday, and I was like, wait a minute. I found another version and other songs called Big Pimpin', but I'm like, no, I need Jay-Z.
So Big Pimpin' is not copyrighted or anything?
I guess not, but you know, like when you're in the mood for one song, like you really want to hear that song. Do you get like that ever? Because I get like that quite frequently, and I searched Big Pimpin' and Spotify did not have. They only had 5 of his songs. I don't get how Spotify works sometimes with that, so I had to go to YouTube and play Big Pimpin'.
Yeah. Speaking of Spotify, our podcast is now on Spotify,
yes.
Which is kind of awesome.
That's the good thing about Spotify.
So if you're listening to this somewhere else and you'd rather listen to it on Spotify, go for it. It's on there.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I have so many playlists on Spotify. I have the paid version, which to me, I can't go back. Like once you have that paid version, you can skip through songs, you can replay songs, you could do anything. Like you're limitless. So why not listen to your podcast? Get your podcast in on Spotify.
Yeah. Thanks so much for listening, obviously, first. Returning listeners, thanks. Again, new listeners, thanks even more.
Thanks, everyone. Welcome.
And actually going through our stats on the podcast, I saw that a lot of you guys are from San Jose.
Woo!
Which we live over here in Sunnyvale.
West Coast is the best coast.
Yeah, so
JK, Miami is the best coast. Miami's not a coast.
Know.
Okay.
California's better.
What, California's better?
Yeah.
California's really cool. I like it here.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, we're stoked about that because if you're listening and you're from San Jose, we're doing a meetup for the podcast November 7th. This is 2018, in case you're listening. Yeah,
if you're listening in the future, or if you're listening somewhere in outer space. Dude, when we were going to Yosemite last weekend, and we had some trippy chats in the car about aliens.
It's like, what else do you do for like 5 hours straight?
Yeah,
it's
we're driving.
Talk about alien, like, have you ever seen a UFO?
We were in the car with other friends. We were talking about really trippy stuff. Ghosts, aliens, spirits, other worlds, other dimensions. I love talking about that stuff. I could do it all day long.
Anyway, meet up for the podcast.
Meet up for the podcast. It's here on Earth, 2018.
Yeah, so November 7th at 6:30 at this place called Sofa Market, SOFA Market, and it's in downtown San Jose.
Yeah, so if you're in the Bay Area in general, wherever, just come by. Healthcare professionals, just a casual meetup.
Yeah, nothing super formal. It's like there's no like speakers or anything. We just kind of like want to meet you guys, and we know a lot of you are from the Bay Area, and a lot of you are from San Jose as well. So if you want to come on out and grab some drinks, chill, talk,
man,
and yeah,
grab some Cuban food.
Jose. Awesome food at this place too. So if nothing else, come get some.
If you don't want to see us, you can just go for the Cuban food.
Just be like, yeah, we're here for the food.
It's so good. And like, I was nervous about Cuban food coming out here, leaving Miami, but no, this totally,
it's
really, totally amazing.
Really good. So yeah, this is part two with our interview with Dr. Nicole LePera. clinical psychologist, right? Yeah. So if you liked the last one, or if you haven't listened to the last one, go check out episode 44. This is episode 45.
Yeah, no, I want to say, if you haven't listened to the last one, you need to stop.
It's a good one.
And listen to that one first, because this episode builds upon last week's episode. And I was really stoked that Dr. Nicole wanted to come back on and finish this conversation. And we talk about maybe some quote unquote weird things, but again, weird is in your perception. We talk about the gut, and she unearths all the layers and all the different steps to gut health, whether you want to hear it or not. Like, it is what it is, and all of us living in this day and age, unless you're an alien with a perfect diet somewhere, or maybe you don't even eat. Alien. Okay, sorry. Like, we all have gut issues, and she talks about her diet and the ancestral diet and eating organ meats, and I wouldn't put it past you, Mike, to eat organ meat. Huh?
I have gut issues.
You have gut issues. You need to drink kombucha. It is my goal. I have kombucha with me right now, Cayenne Cleanse from Health Aid. I would love Health Aid to sponsor the show, because I sponsor their kombucha on a daily basis.
Just in case for some reason they're listening.
Yeah, I hope so. Kombucha is, like, I will choose kombucha over wine. I love it. I love it so much. I love Health Aid. I only drink Health Aid. I'm super biased. Shout out to Health Aid and future hopeful sponsors. But kombucha and fermented foods and kefir, I think I'm saying that right, those are really good for your gut, Mike. So you need to start drinking kombucha, even though you don't like it.
It's
so good.
Smells worse than it tastes. It actually tastes okay.
It doesn't smell bad.
But it smells like I guess it smells exactly like what I would expect rotting tea leaves to smell like. Just pretty, and lumps of bacteria.
We have different tastes, because I smell kombucha and I love it and I want it.
Ugh.
I know you don't, you don't appreciate it.
No, I don't.
Remember when we bought probiotics to travel with us and we never opened the bottle?
Yeah, I bought a whole freaking jar of probiotics to go to Thailand because we thought we were going to be like all
sick.
Sick from their water and food and stuff. We both didn't get sick one time, and we didn't eat any of those probiotic pills the entire time.
No, I got
just like an extra like half a pound of probiotic pills.
Yeah, and now you could. Well, I didn't know then in Thailand. I didn't even know about probiotics that much. I just bought pills. I thought we would get sick, and someone said to do that. But I drink. Just speaking about gut health and going into this conversation, and exploring it a little more, I think now people are taking it more seriously, at least from what I'm seeing. I'm sure people have taken it seriously for a long time. It's just now that a lot of people are waking up to the idea of taking care of our guts first. That's like really the solid foundation for health. And Dr. Nicole really ties the dots or connects the dots between gut health and brain health. And it's connecting the dots.
Connecting the dots.
It's an insight.
So we have this buddy, Alex, who went to Yosemite with us last weekend.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Every time that we were like, I wonder why this is like this, he would always try to connect the dots. And we were like, you should start a podcast, connecting the dots
with Alex.
Maybe
we won't say his last name, but connecting the dots. If you see that podcast coming up, it's our friend.
Yeah.
Inside jokes. Sorry, not sorry. Yeah. She connects the dots between gut health, brain health, and it's quite remarkable. Thinking about, just really quick, talking about going back in time into my eating disorder, thinking about how so many of us, we confuse calories with health, or we confuse, we get it all wrong. Like, I had it all wrong, and not even just talking about the eating disorder, but talking about the patterns of just the knowledge I had back then, thinking, even before the eating disorder, just in general, my knowledge was, if I stay under these amount of calories, that's healthy or not healthy. And and just like, I'm so proud and really excited about the evolution. I think a lot of people are waking up to this, this revolution of taking care of gut health, like food for our health, our brain health, our bodies, not just calories to look good, or there's so much more that goes into food. And so that's why I'm really excited for you to listen to this episode.
Do you think it's a problem for my gut if I ate 7 pieces of pizza today?
Yeah, I think that's a huge problem. Mike, you need to listen to this one, because everything you eat is bad for your gut
right now.
Yeah, because Dr. Nicole talks about gluten. Literally,
it's not my fault. We want a pizza party at work for being compliant, like all of our areas of like online things.
So people are using
so
pizza
they got, like,
still, like
a bunch of boxes of pizza.
In elementary school, we would have pizza parties if like our whichever grade in the elementary school, I don't know, sold the most chocolate or like something like that.
Then it didn't matter if you ate 7 pieces of pizza. But now when I'm 30, if I eat 7 pieces of pizza, I want to take a nap and I hate myself.
Yeah, if I drink 1 glass of wine, I'm hungover. Our bodies are different now.
Yeah.
So you want to take care of your gut?
Yep. Need to drink a booch.
Need to drink a booch? Listen to this episode.
Give me a booch. Listen to the app.
And we'll talk to you guys soon. We'll see if you're in the Bay Area. Again, we'll see you November 7th.
Yeah, November 7th. We'll also talk about this next week, too, on the episode. So I'll give you guys a reminder.
Mm-hmm. Have a great
All
listening.
Right. See you.
It wasn't going to be hard. I was going to call one or the other and hope you would answer.
You would have figured it out, yeah.
Thank you for coming back on and for doing a part 2. Because, like, you're everything that you're about and all your work, and it's, like, I think revolutionizing the way a lot of people think. So,
wow, I am very honored for you to have used that word. That is making me blush. Thank you.
Yeah, I feel it. Like, I am very connected, and I don't feel that way and I'm just, like, talking about Instagram, because I feel like that platform is really, like, changing it used to be more of the selfies and those type of things, but now it's a platform for connection and inspiration and education. So I definitely feel that way.
Yeah, I agree. I think Instagram is becoming a pretty amazing, cool, like kind of trend-setting tool. It's just it's been a wild ride, but I'm very, very thankful for it. I mean, I literally have, I now am able, the scope and the reach of not only being able to get my message out, but the people that I'm doing work with. I mean, my evenings now, it's so cool, are reserved because I have so many people in Australia who, because of the time change, the only time that kind of makes sense is like 8 p.m. on in my life here, because it's the morning the next day there. So, I mean, the fact that I'm thinking time zones and all of that is literally because of the internet, and it's the coolest thing I've ever seen. So,
you're working with people in Australia?
I'm working with people everywhere, yeah. But apparently, a lot of Australia folk are very into the holistic world, holistic work. So I've had several of them reach out and trying to coordinate. I do kind of remote Skype sessions, things like that. So having to coordinate that has been, it's cool. I've had whenever I schedule people now, I have to add in what's your time zone? This is like, oh, wow, like very bizarre. Never thought, but like you said, all because of the internet. It's very cool. A lot of kind of legit people and information on Instagram. Love it.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Sometimes I'll get someone watching my live from Australia and I'm like, what time is it over there?
I know, right? It's probably the next day. It's insane.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially now that I'm on the West Coast. It's so weird. But I feel like the most behind.
Well, you really then would be. I mean, you would be another 3 hours behind them. I mean, me trying to figure that out. Wow. Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah. So anyway, I have some really good stuff, and everything's around the gut health and some questions around that. But before that, I want to ask you, because I'm dying to ask you about the vagus nerve. And I know you did a post about that, and I'm very interested because I recently began chanting. And I don't know if you can be, because it's a nerve, I don't know if you can be aligned or misaligned with it. Like, can you talk more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so essentially what the vagus nerve does is it connects literally the nervous system in our brain to the nervous system in our gut. If you're aware that there's a nervous system down there and all of our gut muscles, things like that, there is. And it actually works on the parasympathetic nervous system. So we have two nervous systems. Probably you've heard the fight or flight, which is a sympathetic nervous system. It's the one that activates literally our heart rate, our body, our muscles to fight the tiger, go to war, all that stuff, keep us alive. And then the parasympathetic nervous system is called the rest and digest nervous system, because essentially that's what it is responsible for. All of our, kind of calming, when our body's calm and rested, we're digesting our food, all of that kind of good stuff. So there's a lot of things that we can actually do to stimulate it. And so when we're stimulating our vagus nerve, what we're doing is so I guess I'll back up a second. We all spend way too much time as humans based on not only, kind of what we're putting in our body, but our environments and what our thoughts are, our mental environments, as we talked a lot about last time. We spend way too much time in our sympathetic nervous system. That's like pretty much chronically turned on. That is the one that's associated with cortisol, the stress hormone. So ultimately what we want to do is start to spend more and more time in that parasympathetic nervous system. So I say all that to say that when we stimulate our vagus nerve through things like chanting, meditation, gargling, a lot of exercise, it's funny, I just did a whole thing on lifestyle things that we could do to stimulate our vagus. Those things turn on or stimulate that parasympathetic nervous system. So it's allowing us to, so the thing about the nervous systems too is, I guess I should say, they can't both be switched on at the same time. So when we're in sympathetic, parasympathetic is off. When we're in parasympathetic, sympathetic is off. Vice versa. I don't know what I just said, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The long story short of it is, every time we're stimulating that by doing things like chanting, which is very cool that you started to do that, we are turning on that rest and digest system.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, and you said it, and this happens because we just live in 2018, at the time of this recording, where everything elicits like that fight or flight response in us, and if we're not careful, we let that idle for too long, and we operate from the sympathetic nervous system, and we're not connected to that parasympathetic, that rest and digest when we should be, because a lot of the things we do aren't life or death emergencies. So in turning on the vagus nerve, I know you said gargling, chanting. I know you also mentioned laughter. I thought that was really cool.
Yes. Laughing. So interestingly, and this is one easy way to like kind of remember the things that help that. Like I said, because it's literally a nerve that goes from the back of our throats. So whenever we do, like you're saying, the gargling, the laughing, right? That's a very we're like stimulating manually the top of that nerve.
Oh, okay.
Singing loudly is also one of them. Humming. So anytime literally we're like moving, vibrating, I don't know what the word would be, our back throat area, if you will, we are literally manually stimulating that. Acupuncture, massage, those things do it. Fasting, there's many different lifestyle things that we can do. So every time we're doing those things, I mean, all of these have other benefits as well, but one of their major benefits is turning on that rest and digest and getting us out of that constant cortisol overwhelmed state that I think a lot of us. So one of the things that you'll hear a lot of too, it's being talked about, is adrenal fatigue.
Yes.
And that's a byproduct of too much time with cortisol in fight or flight. So those of us who are struggling with those symptoms, definitely want to start doing some of this vagus nerve stimulation.
Yeah, I remember I talked to someone. I was in a mastermind at the beginning of the year for my start of my business, and when I mentioned burnout, someone thought I was referring to just adrenal fatigue. But I had never heard of it before, because I was talking about burnout as a work phenomenon. And then I realized that adrenal fatigue is kind of like that. It's kind of like overworking your, like you said, like overworking your adrenals, and then too much cortisol, and then all that can impact your health. And I was reading, when I was Googling it and researching it, that it's not considered like a real thing as of yet, or there's not enough research, or I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, that depending on what you're reading, I'm sure it'll say many different, kind of things. There are, whether or not, if you go to a functional medicine doctor, integrative medicine doctor, they likely will acknowledge it. I mean, but I mean, it's real in so much as whether we're calling it something or not. I mean, the cortisol going through our body is real, right? And there's definitely going to be some physiological, psychological, emotional consequences of that. And like I said, the interesting part, and again, not to go back to what we talked about last time, but what turns that on, can be everything from how we're living, what we're eating, what we're doing, what we're not doing, how we're sleeping, how we're not sleeping, but also our thoughts, right? Because I mean, as I think I said to you last week, we could sit there and I could be laying on a couch in a very restful state, but if I'm thinking about the fight or the fact that my boss yelled at me at work, my whole body is going to be in that sympathetic state, as opposed to the parasympathetic state as I'm literally laying.
No, it's definitely like something that I think is, from what I've read, is something that's newer, and something that it's just termed that way is just a newer concept, but to acknowledge the fact that it's happening, like it's cortisol, like being exposed to prolonged levels of cortisol have many negative implications that I have felt. I'm sure many of our listeners have felt. So this is like one quick side note. I don't know if this is related to the vagus nerve or not, but sometimes when I record podcast episodes by myself, I get really like, it's kind of weird sometimes recording whole episodes by myself, and I get a little bit self-conscious, and if I don't like how I sound, I delete it, I start again. A 30-minute episode turns into like a 2-hour recording. And then I start, what happens is that I start burping and hiccuping, and it's like, I don't know if that's just being uncomfortable with my voice. If I'm just, I get to the point where I'm so stressed, like, and maybe it's like, it has to do with the vagus nerve. Is that even like related? Because that never happens.
Well, I mean, interestingly, whether or not it's, I mean, the vagus nerve is very much, when we're talking gut-brain axis, which essentially is like the mind-body connection piece, right? That's implicated in that. That's part of what we're talking about. So, I think what you're having is, the physiological effects of stress, right? That ultimately is related to the vagus, and so much as that it's, again, that sympathetic that's turned on, and not that. And I think when our body is stressed, or when we are thinking stressful thoughts, that self-consciousness, right? That to me indicates there's an anxiety that's increasing, right? Stress, if you will, it's increasing. And then usually we have whether it's the butterflies in our stomach or our mouth goes dry, there's, again, some physiological byproduct of that, and so for you, it's not necessarily in the gut area, which I think where some of us, will more likely be able to identify it. Oh, I feel like I'm going to barf, or I feel like I have butterflies. But, because it's the tip of the vagus, I mean, quite very well could be, it is your body's physiological response to stress. And it very well could be vagus connected.
Yeah, it's weird because I don't, and this is like a little gross, but like the type of burps that happen when I'm recording are not I don't do that regularly.
Probably not outside of recording. Yeah.
Yeah. Only I experienced this when I first started recording. I'm like, what is in me?
It's so interesting. Yeah.
So interesting. And
that's your body's stress response
to talking so much.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I mean, not cool to learn to at least acknowledge that. And Sometimes I have to take a breather and pause.
Well, yeah. So yeah, suggestions are, so when you're starting, because you're feeling that self-consciousness, some anxiety, physiological arousal is happening, right? A stress response of sorts. Anything you can do, whether it's step away, take 3 deep breaths, any deep, slow breaths where our out breath is longer than our in breath, right? That will, again, start to turn on that parasympathetic, which will decrease your stress and hopefully stop your burping.
Yeah, it does. When I have to step away and do that and remember that I need to do that more, because sometimes I'm like, no, I got this. I'll do this right now. I'll record this right now. And then I have this.
Yeah. Well, listen, I am not, and you probably can tell a little bit, but I was not born in front of a camera. We'll put it that way. So when I started to do my videos, my little stories, things like that on Instagram, I was very self-conscious, and I would have similar, kind of experiences. I wouldn't be burping, but I would, my voice would either speed up or slow down. I would start to show, to the camera, literally the stress that my body was having. So, and then I would get frustrated at myself for doing it, because I could talk to anyone, but in front of the camera, I had all self-consciousness, same sort of thing. And I would drive myself crazy. And then I have to kind of actively, cognitively, consciously remind myself, step away, take breaths, move the energy around, calm yourself down.
Yeah. Like, we're not perfect, even though we help people. We have to remind ourselves of things we teach people.
We're human too. Yeah, I know, right? That's the thing. As cliche as it sounds, but we are often we do not take our best advice.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm really interested in talking to you about the gut and gut health. I remember reading an article a few years ago about the gut being the second brain. I think I read that in high school. And I was so intrigued, and then I had never really thought about it. Like, I knew about it, but that was like maybe the last time I thought about it until you started really sharing a lot of that information. So the gut being the second brain, and you said, the vagus nerve plays a role in that. So can you talk about like gut health 101?
Yeah, so gut health 101. So essentially, a starting point is the fact that our guts, literally, and our brains are connected, and they're, like you said, connected by something called a vagus nerve. They're also connected because there's a lot of things that happen in our guts that actually end up then affecting our brains. So, in terms of gut health, there's kind of like a four stage or 4 issues that, a lot of us struggle from, and they actually kind of like bleed into each other, that I think is really important to know about. And I think one of the major reasons that I talk about this, and I think as a psychologist, it's so very important to talk about, is the fact that when our guts are out of balance or nutritionally, when we're not, having the diets that we should have, a lot of symptoms that we have in terms of, a lot of times you'll hear like a brain fog, overwhelm, low energy, low mood, anxiety, depression, emotional reactivity, anything from those sort of psychological symptoms to kind of IBSs, autoimmune, a lot of, all of those things, are connected to the health of our guts. And I think as a psychologist, it's really important because a lot of people, are walking around with now diagnosis labels, and are on medications, in terms of the conventional treatment. I know we talked a lot about that last time, are getting medicated for these labels, essentially, that sometimes aren't actually kind of mental health or actually in the brain at all, that are actually much more connected to, gut issues ultimately. So I think, as a psychologist, in the mental health field, it's so important because, like I said, I think a lot of misdiagnosis and mistreatment is happening at that level because we're not understanding the pivotal role that literally the guts play. And like I was saying last time, the conventional model is so much more based on it's a brain problem. So there's a brain solution. And I think we're missing the first step in the process. So because, like I said, there's this gut-brain axis, Our brains and our guts are literally connected in multiple ways. So several things that I think a lot of us struggle from in terms of gut problems are, so there's this, we have bacteria in our gut, in our bodies, essentially, most of which is in our guts. There's a stat that a lot of people like to throw around, that we are actually 10 times more bacteria than we are human cells. So we are a living, breathing organism. And the beauty of that is that all of these bacteria have a kind of symbiotic relationship. You know, they all live together. They all kind of like do these great things for our body to keep us functioning well as humans, which is wonderful when it's working. And the other side of that is there are so many of them that sometimes the, you know, quote unquote bad bacteria starts to take over. And we then have an imbalance in our gut bacteria, which causes a lot of issues, including, you know, if our balance is off, if we have more bad bacteria than good, our guts aren't going to function. They're not going to absorb the nutrients in the food we're eating as well, if at all. Depending on how bad our imbalance is, there can be actual damage to our gut lining. And the farthest, and then when it's really off as well, and if it's off chronically, if our bad bacteria, you know, outweighs our good for a long enough period of time, we can actually have inflammation as well. So pretty big problems. And what I was saying earlier in terms of, you know, nutritional deficiencies that kind of masquerade in psychological symptoms, a huge one. So if our gut bacteria is off and we're not absorbing nutrients, particularly B12, that's a very, very, very important one. We can have symptoms like weakness, fatigue, low mood, and the symptoms literally can mimic depression. So again, if our bacteria is off, if we're not absorbing things like B12, we could be walking around thinking, you know, we're having depression and getting medicated or treated, you know, in the brain for this depression. That is really the result of our gut bacteria being off. So that's the first level of problem in the gut. I mentioned the gut lining. So the second issue that happens for a lot of us is we get something that is called leaky gut. So our gut lining is very, very thin. And it's very thin because, like I was saying earlier, our guts are where our nutrients, our food goes, and it breaks down with those microbes I was just talking about. And then it needs to literally pass through our gut lining into our bloodstream so that all of our cells can get all these good nutrients. Because it's so thin, that means it can be damaged. And there now is a lot in our external environments, a lot in the food we're eating. There's a lot of things that can happen that can cause damage to our gut lining and inflammation in our gut lining, which then means literally so a big thing I'm going to talk about, and I always talk about in terms of nutritional changes that I highly suggest we all make is, and I'm probably sure you heard of it, is gluten. Gluten actually contains proteins, a protein that literally pokes a hole in this gut lining. So the problem with that is so the gut lining's made up, like I said, so that it allows good nutrients out. When there are holes in it, bigger particles, toxins can start to leak out into our bloodstream. That becomes really problematic when those toxins, you know, those bad things travel up to our brains, because our brains also have a similar, you know, barrier like the gut lining. It's called the blood-brain barrier that can also be penetrated in that same way. So when those toxins, as you can imagine, now start to get through that blood-brain barrier, now they're getting into our brain, and that's then where brain inflammation occurs. And there's a lot of research that's out there now that is describing, I think very accurately so, depression as a result of brain inflammation. So in areas of so I say depression, but many things, cognitive, memory issues. I mean, just imagining it logically, right? When our brains start to inflame, those areas are probably not going to be working so well, and they're going to have some translatable effect either in our thinking, in our emotions, in things like that. So that's the second level. So we have, you know, our bacteria being off, That bacteria being off sometimes leads to our gut being permeable, and that leaky gut, which I then said leads to leaky brain. Then what happens is we have an immune system, and actually a fun fact that some of you might be aware of, maybe not, but 70% of our immune system is actually located in our gut. And the major reason for that, again, possibly logically, maybe not, is that, again, the food, the things that we're ingesting, as a first line of defense, our immune system is right there to make sure that, the good stuff is there and that it's taking care of the not so good stuff. And what better of a place, obviously, than, the place where our food goes. That's the thing that as humans that we're consuming the most of. So our immune system, obviously, when it's working well, it attacks, invaders, if you will, bad things. And it obviously leaves all of the good stuff to go and, make our bodies healthy and we're functioning great. But so connecting those first two pieces, if our guts are permeable, if our bacteria is off, if our guts are permeable, now things are being released into our bloodstream, anywhere from identified toxins. And when I mean that is what, like, toxins that our immune system might know are bad, to particles. And I say this because we have an environment, a food environment as well these days, where there's a lot of crap that our body doesn't know what it is. We're eating preservatives. We're eating chemicals. We're eating literally the way I lab food is the way I refer to it. We're eating things that our body doesn't know what this is. So if that's coming through our guts, what then is happening is our immune system, thankfully, on one level, right, is launching an attack on these items, on these toxins. And that becomes problematic when it then starts to attack. This is what autoimmune problems are the result of. It will start to then attack healthy tissue. Wherever these toxins kind of come to settle and come to find themselves, then our immune system starts to attack that. So in a way, those three things, like I said, are quite connected. The bacteria, the permeability, and then the immune system. And another important one that I just kind of want to highlight, because I think this is, increasingly evidence is being shown of how problematic this is, insulin resistance. So a little quick primer on insulin. Our bodies insulin is so very important for all of the cells and therefore organs in our bodies to function. And the reason why that is insulin is kind of like the analogy that a lot of us use is insulin is the key that lets glucose, which is what our cells need to some extent to function, into our cells. The problem, however, is that with the amount of sugar consumption that is pretty rampant in our society these days, both by choice and not by choice, kind of all of the sneaky sugar, I was actually horrified when I saw how much sugar was in a lot of things that I could not imagine had sugar. Turns out they do. We are just inundated with too much insulin, which means that over time, when that happens chronically, it doesn't stop happening when we're just sugar all day, all night, our cells lose the sensitivity to the insulin, which means that they stop letting the nutrients in. And as you can imagine, the problems with that are very, very vast. Cells stop functioning. When that obviously is connected to our brain, our emotional centers are off, our brains aren't functioning very well. And there's a lot of problems when that's the case. So that's kind of the four big gut things that happen that have very translatable effects in terms of the brain and then mood.
Damn.
Mm-hmm.
Man, okay.
Not to paint a bleak picture or anything, but yeah, that's the state of affairs.
Mm-hmm. Damn. Yeah. Like,
I know I gave you a lot, but I just wanted to have like kind of the rundown of the stuff, of the gut stuff.
No, this was perfect. Thank you for going over everything. Do you think a lot of people live in this chronic state of gut imbalance for years? I mean, I think in our Western society, we do.
Yes, I think everyone does. I think in every society, honestly, at this point, because there's so much that affects our gut health. If you've ever taken an antibiotic, The problem with antibiotics, as I'm sure a lot of you might even know, antibiotics. So this is kind of the gut bacteria piece. This is where they start to throw things off. They kill all bacteria. So if you ever take an antibiotic, actually, if you've ever, I'll bring it back to our births. By birth, quite often, a lot of us, have had a trauma of sorts in terms of if we were a C-section, we're not getting, so part of the birthing process is we come through our mother's vagina and we get the microbes from her, which become our first immune system, essentially. I could go back and step it back even further and say the health of our mother is going to affect our health as a developing fetus, but I'll start at birth, but that happens too. So we have that, right? And then we have birth, depending on, if we did not have that, if we had a C-section. There's a lot of thought and actually research, animal and human research out there now, that the sterile environment of hospitals, right, they start to throw off. So, I can date it back so far that I think I'm pretty confident in saying we all have some gut issue. And then obviously you become an adult, you make food choices, you maybe live, Western diet, although quite honestly, I do a lot of traveling and I'm seeing a lot of remnants of the Western diet in all aspects of the world now, the sugars, the oils, a lot of aspects of the diets pretty much internationally at this point, in my opinion, are very toxic to the gut. The prevalence of gluten, I kind of shouted that out. A lot of people eat a lot of gluten. The presence of sugar, like I said, a lot of people eat a lot of sugar. The amounts that we're eating are on some level causing some level of gut damage. So to answer your question, yes, I think pretty much all of us need to do a good gut healing protocol and kind of reboot things. But that's the beauty of it. And that's the thing and why I do the holistic work I do. All of this can be healed. The stories that I've read in terms of, healing of the gut that have healed everything from not only, obviously I'm in the business of all things, mental wellness, but there's this doctor, Dr. Terry Walls, who was literally debilitated on her last legs of life with MS, who's walking and talking and shaking around and living a life these days. So just the amount of healing that can happen. So all is not lost. Yes, in my opinion, we all have some version of gut, non-health to contend with. But the beautiful part is that our body is a self-regulating system. So, if we take the right steps, I think we can all give our guts some balance and some healing. And then whatever symptoms we're having as a result of it, we can more or less remove them.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Amazing. I have two things I have to say. And first of all, I downloaded your gut health, your free gut health guide, and that lit a little fire under me. So last week, when we went grocery shopping, and this whole week, I've been so proud of myself.
Good.
And it's like, what I was telling my husband is that, and he kept pointing out, your diet is not terrible. And I said, I know, but I have a lot of inflammatory foods. And what really pissed me off, what really got me going, was that I just turned 30 a few weeks ago, and I'm breaking out like as if I was 18. Yeah, I've had acne since I was 12. And if like at this time of the recording, if you saw my face, like I even posted about it on my stories because I'm so over it. This is the time, like I was over it years ago, and I just and the thing with what frustrated me the most was like going on and off antibiotics. So the last time I went to the dermatologist, they prescribed 2 antibiotics, and I just left, and I never went to the pharmacy. I never picked them up because I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm like, I've been on and off by antibiotics since I was like 13. I'm not doing this.
So a couple of things. First of all, you should be proud of yourself. And I always, every time I try to do this, obviously with myself, and every time, when I'm working with people, I truly believe in celebrating our little small victories. I think that's so motivating, and I think it's so important to do that. I think we spend so much time focusing on what we're not doing. So be proud of yourself, and everyone out there, definitely, celebrate those small things. I think it's so important to keep us going. But in terms of acne, so our skin is our largest organ, and a lot of detoxification. I mean, obviously we're all familiar with sweat. A lot of detoxification happens literally through our skin. So a lot of skin diseases, whether it's from acne to eczemas and things like that, are actually, again, the result of a gut sort of food nutritional type issue. And it's interesting you say that because I myself, when I was right before, I had kind of the lower chin type of, every now and again when I was getting my period, type of acne. But right before I made my big, huge diet overhaul, when I was back, I was not eating meat. I was more or less on a vegetarian, at times vegan diet. I think, missing a lot of nutrients. My acne started to expand. I was in my, mid-30s at this time. I was like, what is going on? It's actually getting worse. I've never, it was all over, at times my face, outside of my cycle. I was very, very surprised. And on top of that, and I still get these if I cheat and have myself some gluten. So I think that acne was a result of my nutrition or my lack of nutrition. And again, probably a buildup of all of the still toxic things. So even though I was, eating, what I thought was a healthy vegetarian diet, I was still having a lot of the processed stuff that I think was literally coming out of my pores. But another thing that happens, myself and a lot of clients that I work with have this too, is I started to get these little bumps on my upper arms, not like pimples, but like little bumpy bumps.
My husband has them on his arms.
And I don't know how much gluten he eats, but that can very much be connected to at least on my body, my gluten intake. So when I cut out gluten, when I made my diet change, my acne on my face went away. And then when I cut out gluten and when I remain off gluten, and I say this because I had a little hurrah in Italy. I was in Italy for a couple weeks over the summer, and I went a little gluten happy. The treats over there as a former sugar addict, I was living large, and I paid, and I started to get those bumps again. By the end of those 3 weeks, I would feel my arm, and they were coming back very lightly. So interesting. But the skin, it comes a lot of our detoxification. So anyone who's struggling with any sort of skin issue, and obviously the worst cases being, and I've seen some terrible cases, obviously all over the internet, of people really struggling with eczemas and things like that can be pretty fully cured with dietary changes.
Yeah. My acne is always around my chin, and it's like and it happened like after I go through phases. So then when I got this breakout, and it was around the time where we had our first interview, and I downloaded your gut, your free gut guide. And then this week I've been making some serious changes. So I know that, like, this is not about a diet, and this is not about losing weight, because I don't even care about my weight. I just want to stay the way I am. But it's about improving your gut health, and I think once you improve your gut health, then that's the foundation for, like you said, that is the foundation for a lot of these quote unquote like labels and diagnoses and even acne and all this stuff. So I think that's like taking care of your gut is one of the first things you should take a look at.
Absolutely. I think, and so just keep at it, because these changes, don't happen literally. They don't happen overnight. We have to take into consideration, how much we've been eating and kind of treating our guts in this one way that hasn't been so helpful. So, just kind of stay the course. They will, these things, I think will fully go away. And to speak to that point, anytime I'm working with people, because I take a holistic approach, one of the first things, I suggest highly strongly, I can't make anyone do anything, but I really think you should consider doing, is something that is called an elimination diet. And essentially what that is it's very similar to, if you've seen my gut healing guide, foods that I would suggest you kind of more globally, generally eat or don't eat, avoid. But what an elimination diet is, which is really very cool, is you do it, for a minimum of a month. And you are very, very strict. So what is very similar to an elimination diet is kind of the Whole30 diet that a lot of you probably have heard about. But essentially what it is, you're really strict on your food choices, and you are removing all universally gut damaging foods. So the glutens, the sugars, anything processed, preservatives, soy, dairy for a lot of people can be problematic, though some people it's okay with. So there's a whole bunch of things that you remove. And you're also removing some questionable foods. So there's the universal foods that we know are pretty bad for every human. And then there's, a handful of foods that, and there's a lot of different theories on why these things, affect people differently. Some of it is, how our bodies break down or convert nutrients in food. I have a theory on a lot of it's kind of is ancestral based. I think some of it is based on kind of where literally our families, our blood is from, all of that. But ultimately, you remove food that could cause a problem. You remove it for long enough that your gut heals itself, and then you start to gradually reintroduce the food. Because as I probably mentioned to you, I'm not a person who believes in a manualized, a step-by-step, a universal protocol for what anything is, what mental health is for someone. I don't think that there's one nutritional protocol that is universal. I think it's very much, like I said, based on the individual body. So what you do once you've removed food long enough to heal is you start to reintroduce you never reintroduce the bad foods, in my opinion, but those questionable foods, when you start to reintroduce them, you literally get almost immediate feedback from your body on whether or not it's good for you. And a crazy personal experience I had. So like I said, I was a vegetarian, which meant I ate a ton of raw vegetables all of the time. Beans were my livelihood. I did an elimination diet. I removed all of that. I gradually started to reintroduce things. I made a chili one night and couldn't have a chili without red beans. I threw in some red beans, and I was never in so much pain in my life. My gut I felt like it was stabbing. This was a food that I literally ate daily. But because I ate it for so long, my body didn't even I could not register the fact of how damaging it was, because there was just so much damage, essentially, that I needed to heal my gut. And then I was like, wow, I can't eat beans. So beans are on my non-eating list. So I think healing the gut is a necessary first step. And like I said, if you do an elimination diet, I think it's very cool, very important, because it heals the gut, but then it also gives you that opportunity to get some pretty immediate feedback on what works for you. And then obviously you make your choices based on what works or what doesn't work.
Great. Yeah. And I really think you brought something up, and I want to talk about meat. So actually, when I went to the doctor a few years ago, I was feeling the effects of low B12. I was my extremities, my arms, my fingers were tingly. And actually today, my pinky was tingling. I'm like, gotta take my B12. But and this was during a time where I was also experiencing the work burnout and anxiety. So I was completely depleted of energy. And then my doctor, I did some blood work. She asked, are you a vegetarian? And I said, no. She's like, your B12 is extremely low. And I do, and I've never cut out meat. I consume meat, but that got me thinking. And then, once I started to take B12 again, I mean, she offered the shots at the time, which I didn't, but maybe if I got tested again, maybe I might need them. But you said that before, and I know B12 comes from animal products. And so can you just talk about the importance of that?
Yeah. So like I said earlier, I mean, the symptoms that you're having, as well as some other symptoms of B12, they pretty much could look like depression. So anywhere from the physical symptoms, like you're saying, the weakness, the tingling, the tiredness, things like that, to actually mood related symptoms. I mean, these are really problematic things that we're all walking around with, thinking it's either just us or it's stress, right? Or it literally is depression, and maybe we're prescribed an SSRI, depression medication, and none of it's working. But what it is B12. So B12 is a hugely important, it's just hugely important period for all functioning. And yes, you're absolutely right. B12 is found, predominantly, a lot of people will. So there's this whole debate, and I choose not to go into it with whether or not we could find these type of things in plants, et cetera, et cetera. The issue mainly with plant-based diet is while there are, nutrients in plants, absolutely, I'm not going to argue that there aren't nutrients in plants. The way our body is not set up to convert them. And some of us actually can't convert those nutrients. So when we're talking about animal product and all, not only are they nothing kind of compares more or less to most animal products in terms of the nutrients, our body can convert those very easily, meaning that we eat it and if our body uses it without a step in the middle. And like I said, some of us aren't even equipped for whatever reason physiologically to take that step. So B12 is one of the hugely, hugely, hugely important ones. Like I said, I was suffering too from a lot of, B12 type of deficiency symptoms myself. My anxiety was through the roof when I was not, eating meat. Something also interesting, you said tingling, and I thought of my whole life, I had the coldest hands and the coldest feet.
My hands are so cold.
And and I actually I don't know if a doctor told me this when I was, growing up or what, but there's a condition out there and it's called Raynaud's. Ray, right? So I had Raynaud's. My sister had it, and I was like, okay, I'm just a sufferer of Raynaud's. My partners, I would try to hold their hand, like, don't touch me, So it's like I was cold, and I truly believe that too was a byproduct. So when I reintroduced meat, all of it went away. I can touch people, my hands, my feet. I'm not cold anymore. I think B12 is hugely important and has everything from the physical stuff. And so I think, eating the meat product, I think it's very important. I don't think that there's any way around it. A lot of times, I think a lot of people are divided on this, but organ meat, so, the livers, all of that good stuff, very, very high concentrations of all of the good stuff, all of the B vitamins, B12s. So I suggest those. I know that, especially in the beginning too. So when you're on this elimination diet, because we want to heal the gut, all of these foods and the B12s, not only will they start to give our body the nutrients that it might not be getting enough of, these are very much gut healing foods too. So eating those, as much as possible, I very much suggest. If you can stomach the organs, I am a huge proponent of throwing in organ meat. I actually, don't dislike them at all. So I get them from my local farm. I cook them, I eat them, but something I do suggest, because I know not everyone feels as positively about those, and this is a great way to get in, the B12 in particular as well. There's great supplements out there. One that comes to mind, if you're interested, is this company. I always kind of shout them out because I think they just do a great job. A supplement called Ancestral Nutrition, that you can find them on Amazon, and they pretty much have any organ supplement. They have supplement mixtures if you want. So if people who are hesitant, don't like the taste, or maybe a little squeamish on meat in particular, they're very tasteless. The owner does a very, very good job. He's very receptive. I think he's great. So I suggest, if you're not going to be, or if you're not getting as much meat as you can, that supplementation with that is important. But something I do want to say about supplements too, because this connects into gut health and kind of also plugs the importance of healing the gut first. Like I said earlier, if our gut, if our bacteria is off, if our gut lining is damaged, we are not going to be absorbing nutrients in food or the supplements we're taking. So a lot of times I think people, and I have a lot of people who actually reach out to me, and I get it. They want to know, what supplement can I take to fix this or help this? And I always kind of tell them, or kind of warn them, that if you're supplementing without healing your gut first, you're not going to be getting, the full effect of the supplements too. So just something to keep in mind for anyone who is, kind of wanting to, or is on supplements of sorts. If it's not feeling like it's working as well, it very well might not be. And that's because you really do need to take that first step of healing the gut. And then you might get to the point where, if your diet, if you're consuming, nutritionally the foods that you need, you might not need the supplementation, but some of us still might. And then you add them in, and then you will be actually absorbing the supplements.
I love that. I think a lot of people, they romanticize the idea of everything, of cleaning their gut, or maybe improving, not even their gut, but just romanticizing their nutrition. So they do like these long cleanses or these trendy products, but without really addressing the main issue, which is the gut. So I'm really glad you talked about that. And oh my gosh, so my ballet teacher, when I was a dancer, she would wear gloves and a scarf to class because she had Raynaud's. And we're in Florida. So that I had to say that.
I walked around looking like a crazy person sometimes because it would not be cold out, and I would look around and no one else was, as cold as I was. But I thought, okay, I just had this thing. This is just genetically who I am.
Yeah, and then when you realize it's not, And another thing about the meat that's really interesting, I know you posted something about eating a heart the other day, and I was like, oh my God, like my first reaction was like, I gasped because I'm like, oh, I've never done that before. But actually, so I have a lot of family in Argentina, and when I went there, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but they eat a lot of meat. And when I went there, it was Mother's Day. They had like every part of the animal on the table, livers, kidneys. I was young. So I was like 17, and I was so overwhelmed. I went to the bathroom and I threw up.
Yeah.
I was like, I've never seen these things, and I couldn't even eat, but I was really young. But yeah, that's funny. It's like, it's common. Like it's very common down there in Argentina to have a lot of meat and organ meat. So I think I might, I have to stomach it now. I've never approached it, but even my husband, if we're somewhere and he sees heart, he's like, yeah, like let's try that. I'm like, I don't know.
It's funny. I was always so before I stopped eating meat, I ate meat up through my probably mid to late 20s. So I was very adventurous. I like trying. So anytime there was, something crazy on the menu, and I lived in New York City, so I had a lot of opportunities to do that. I was very much a trier of those things. So, coming back to meat, it's not as, I wasn't as squeamish about it. But the cool thing about eating organs is, two things. So, in animal, in the animal kingdom as well, there is actually, it's kind of a hierarchical thing. The domineering, the alpha animals, are the ones that are have first rights to the organs of the animals that they kill. And again, they're, in tribes and things like that, usually it's the men who go out and hunt the animals. The organs are the most prized meat, and that's because they're the most nutrient dense meat. So that's the first little fun thing. But the cool thing about organ therapy, that's essentially when you're eating organs, whether or not you're eating the organs or, like I said, taking the supplements of the organs, not only are they so nutrient dense, but they, the way you can think of it, it's like kind of silly, but in like simplistic, but they actually help the organ that you're eating. So if you're eating the heart, right, literally that will help your heart. If you're eating an animal's heart, it will help your heart in terms of nutrient. If you're eating a kidney or a liver, same thing. So it's funny you say that. I actually have a little thing of chicken hearts sitting out on my counter for my dinner tonight.
Oh my God!
So I will be consuming, not to upset anyone, but I will be consuming. I just did my farm run. So about meat, for those of you who do eat meat, I think it's really, really important to the best of our ability, making sure that you're sourcing the best meat that you can eat, because there's a lot of not so positive kind of practices out there. Just thinking of it logically, if the animal's unhealthy, their muscles that you're eating, their organs that you might be eating are going to be very, very unhealthy. So there's this really, really great website I always suggest. It's called eatwild.com. And if you go on there, and I think it's like by zip code or area somehow, you put in where you're from. And it gives you a list of all of the farms in the area, that do the things that you want to look for when you're eating meat. Definitely organs. I would never suggest eating a conventionally raised, so like kind of the big mass farming raised animal organ, because again, thinking about what the organs do, they're especially, the livers are processing out these toxins. You definitely don't want to be eating a toxic animal's liver or organ. So you want to make sure that you're looking for grass-fed So anything that says grass fed, that essentially means that that animal was raised on grass, because a lot of times animals get corn and, not so great food. And I have my thoughts on corn. When I'm talking elimination diet, one thing you're not eating is corn. Corn is actually one of the most genetically modified. There's actually no real corn out there anymore. For many different reasons. Thank you, Monsanto. So corn is really, really problematic. So if you think about if the animal is only eating corn, how healthy is this animal? There's a lot of other practices too with the way they're fed to bulk them up, to make sure that they're getting the things they're injected with to keep them alive, essentially. So just something to be warned. The meat eaters out there, just if you're able, cool kind of trick or a hack that I always like to shout out. There was Costco is a really great, for those of us who have Costco's near us or access to Costco. They surprisingly have a pretty decent selection of these grass-fed, these better meats for you. So, because I know the price can sometimes be an issue. So Costco's a suggestion. Eat Wild is a suggestion. I make it a point once a month. I drive out to a farm that's about an hour and a half away, and I get my haul of meat, and I get a month's worth, and then I drive it back. So I make a day of it.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing this, because I think in our conventional food diets, we don't think about, at least many people don't think about it. So thank you for being so open and transparent with that, because I think that that's really, it's really important that we explore, us meat eaters or anyone to explore this. And I have all your recommendations that are going to go in the blog post for this podcast interview. So people can look up like all the things that you said with the Eat Wild and all that. But,
awesome. Yeah. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
No, I'm just like, and this is opening me too. I just think automatically we assume, ew, gross, just because it's not normal, but it's not gross or weird. It's just, it's not a part of our conventional diet. So I think it's really cool.
It's crazy too. Whenever I eat liver, beef liver in particular, I literally can feel the effects of it. I just feel like a little more energy. I actually just put it in. I made some meatballs for lunch, and so here's another kind of cool trick too. If you're trying to eat it, and it's a piece of liver is a lot. Slapping it on a pan, frying it up, and eating it, that can be a lot for some people. So I like to kind of dice it up, and sometimes I'll make it in like a sauce of sorts. But I also dice it up and then mix it in with another ground meat. So this afternoon I just did ground beef and chopped up liver, ground it in there. And you can still taste it, it's not gone, the taste of it, but, it's definitely much more of the ground meat taste too. But yeah, it's definitely, a lot of it's cultural too. Like you said, I think there's a lot of cultures out there that, are very much either much more meat heavy or incorporate organs. So it might not be so gross for some people, but yeah, I think the standard American diet just doesn't. I mean, the kind of joke I always think about is like, it's like almost like punishment when you feed children liver and onions. Type of thing. I just think it's not like normal, or it's not like the everyday thing. But start to add it in, I do think that it's not only internally hugely beneficial, but you might actually start to feel it. Like I said, I get a dip of energy. It's pretty cool.
Oh my God, that's so cool. Like, okay, so this episode, I'm so happy we did it. And there's a lot of really golden nuggets in here. I can't wait for our listeners to read. I mean, not read. Well, read or listen to, because it will be a blog, and implement. So where can people find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So 2 places. The main place that I'm on daily is Instagram at the.holistic.psychologist. Come check me out. I'm posting all the time. I am, kind of sharing all of this sort of fun stuff on gut. You get to see what I eat, etc. I also have a website at yourholisticpsychologist.com. On there, so I know, and I thank you, Erica, for mentioning, I do have a gut healing guide I just released. So for those of you who are interested, if you head over to if you go to my Instagram as well, the link for my website is in my bio. So if you head over to my website, you will see a little email list sign up box. So if you sign up, not only will you be on my email list, which means that every week I send out my new blog or tips or things like that into your inbox, but you will also get this new gut healing guide. So I think it has, I tried really hard to break it down, make it understandable, and give kind of some actionable steps to start to remove the foods that are not working for you and to add in the ones that are, and to start to spread the gut love.
Spread the gut love. You should copyright or trademark that.
I love that. It's funny too, because that's actually what I was like jokingly when I was just making up this the PDF on my own computer, I just titled it Gut Love because I thought it was cute. And then as I was sending it out, I was like, I'm gonna keep that. So that's what it's called. When it comes to your inbox, it will be called Gut Love.
I love it. So I asked you this the first time, but I'm going to ask you again because maybe your answer has changed. What makes you your most lit up self?
Gut health. No, in all seriousness, that is kind of the serious answer. Honestly, like I know I said it was, kind of being present the last time, but I think that, what a piece of it, I'll add in the body piece this time because it kind of is on topic. Literally feeling good in my body. I think that probably a lot of us can, relate to when you're not feeling good physically. I mean, you're not lit up, put it that way. You're not enjoying life. You maybe can't be present to life. It just, it doesn't feel good to not have, from a physical sense, energy. Right? To not literally, if you're someone who struggles with, and that's the thing, there's a lot of us out there that struggle legitimately with stomach issues, right? With skin issues, like actual issues. So from that end of the spectrum where, oh my God, how can you feel lit in any way, to just generally not feeling great in your body. So the way I feel my most lit self is when my body is balanced and healthy and I have energy and I'm able to feel as alive as possible.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much, Nicole.
Of course. It was so great talking to you. I really appreciate you having me.